what is your opinion on the idea of AI in the arms race? The thing is, look, all companies are fighting for models to be built. Every day, a new model is getting released. Everybody is fighting with that parameters number, right? 7 billion, 150 billion, or whatever, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? Where is it going? Will this keep continuing?
I don't know if the industry people want to start, but yeah.
Yeah.
So AI is no different than anything else, right? It's again a revenue generating thing, and obviously it will continue. And we all know that okay, there is a market for it, so definitely there will be huge competition to it. And more and more investment will definitely go on, because now especially on the RAI, because we know that okay, this is for the AI revenue to grow, which is now probably at 7%, 10% of the overall revenue. But we also know that there is a huge potential to increase that revenue, and that cannot be done by a single center of excellence team, which is for AI. So that's where a huge campaigns is going on within organization to enable everyone, every developer, non-developers, because a lot of knowledge on what the use cases should be developed in AI should come from the non-developer team like HR or procurement and other things. So huge campaigns, trainings, education, everything is going on across organization, so that we definitely increase that revenue for AI. And how will we better doing when compared to our competitors? Even that study will continue to go on.
Curious, Bharati, that does industry see the AI as a direct revenue generator, or is it a
Yes.
facilitator to generate
No,
revenue?
direct revenue
It's a direct
generation.
revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. And RAI also is considered as a direct
Yes,
revenue generator.
we did have a panel discussion within Infosys, and we also had a survey on this specific question. This was one of the 14 questions. So somewhere around 2026 is what we see that we will start monetizing whatever investment that we are doing in RAI. So
Okay, cool, thanks.
So personally, I'm pretty excited with the pace, and I'm really liking the pace at which the progress is happening. The good part I see of this whole, I think, competition across multiple companies and everything is, it would help eventually to democratize the technology, because that's how eventually the cost would come down, the knowledge become more democratized, which we have already seen happening in last 1 year, right? So it's not like proprietary to one company, but now there are open models, there are all class of models. As in, while there are large language model class of models are becoming kind of bigger and bigger, there are others small language models, and those class of models have started emerging as well. And I think there is a place for everything, so all these different types of models can coexist. The good part of democratizing this whole AI process is also, I think the only caution that we need to keep, especially as the AI developers, is that we are not kind of trying to find the nail for the hammer. So it's not like we are trying to deploy generative AI for every possible application, but we are really kind of deploying the technology with a proper understanding, and making sure that we are, for example, right, as in I have seen the things which can be done by simpler ML models. The previous generation and traditional models are now trying to be kind of completed using Gen AI application, which is not good for anyone in terms of the cost, in terms of sustainability and everything. So making sure that we are kind of deploying the technology with proper consciousness is required. But this whole competition is really good. It's fun.
Yeah, I know. I think there are some questions where let me try to put one of the questions. So this
share a quick response on this
Yeah.
arms race question, right? I think as all of you are following the state of the art, I think it would be worth noticing whether the scaling laws, as they call it, right, will continue in perpetuity. If you just throw compute and data at these models, do they just continue improving? Because my sense is that at some point it might hit a wall, right? In which case this arms race actually will become a moot question, right? Everything will just slow down. The pace of it might slow down. So one is to question that assumption of how often it will continue. Two is, I would say, there have been calls, obviously, for a moratorium where everybody kind of stops or scales back. I don't think that's practical, and I don't think that works. In fact, I think a lot of people asking for that are basically trying to slow down the pace of development so they can catch up. So that doesn't work. So I think we need to think of an alternative model, and I've heard some proposals on the table. One recently at this AI for Good summit organized by ITU, by this person called Tristan Harris. How many of you have seen this documentary called The Social Dilemma? The Social Dilemma on Netflix, yeah. So he's basically talking about the AI dilemma, right? And so it's a great kind of thesis. But I think his proposal is that for every $100 million that these companies are spending on AI model development, spend 10%, right? 10 million on responsible and safe AI practices. So as and when you're going ahead with the arms race, at least you're ensuring that safety is kept in mind. I think it's a proposal worth thinking about.
No, I like the optimism that you have, Tanuja. But I think some of the questions, we've discussed this before also. Will these sort of say models and companies building these models will become monopoly in this also? You're talking about democratization, but there's also this worry about, look, these companies can just be the monopoly in doing the business or have access to such large computer parameters and all that. So nobody can do anything with it. That's a question, I guess. Okay, let's move on. This question is an interesting question, interesting in terms of the way it is framed. So humans have a knack for developing and delivering beautiful and revolutionary things from inconsistencies, irregularities, and mistakes. Like, wow. All right. Whether it be art, literature, math, science, or anything else, can AI achieve the same peak? I think let's go to Professor Sudarshan. I'm sure you're this question is designed for you, I guess.
So actually, in one of my articles, journal articles on aesthetics, they asked me to, in the review, they asked me to add a section on AI art. You know that Ghan or whatever that, like there was a painting that was actually sold for $500,000 or pounds or whatever. It was AI painted, which was very extremely similar to a human painting. But especially in the field of art, all that is mentioned in terms of irregularity and asymmetry and many of these things, art is one field where it is supposed to defy reason. So I don't know whether AI has reached that stage where you can genius, something like a genius or a maverick, or so in sports or in science or in any field, arts or music or whatever, any field, you always have these people who are like game changers or mavericks and prodigies and geniuses. So I don't know whether the AI has reached that stage, because AI still I don't know whether how it deals with asymmetries. I'm not very sure about it, because it's still very reason based. So in that sense, I have my own doubts right now, unless it becomes as maverick or as unpredictable as human beings, and I don't think AI can match the human beings actually.
And then you think that ChatGPT 3.5 was not one of those timeline in the history?
No, they are making mistakes, but actually they are not original, in the sense that they are not organic. See, unless you are organic, then you can't perform. You have to perform for making those mistakes. You have to experience to make those mistakes.
Yeah, sure.
So what we have is actually models that have certain characteristics, human characteristics. But to be a human is also to know how to succeed as well as to fail, how to exceed as well as to fall down. So this kind of, that's why I mentioned in my presentation about the spectrum. Can the AI cover the spectrum? If it's able to cover the spectrum, then it can be really similar to humans in that sense.
Because I've been part of some conversations and people have made these remarks, I guess you must have also heard, that the GPT 3.5 release was actually a sort of a big milestone in terms of, because it just landed in in everybody's device, right? Until then, they've been building models. People knew that it was coming. All that suddenly, just everybody had access to it. Everybody was playing with it. I think there is no audience that I've been at, even at a school level. When you say ChatGPT, they all knew about it. Right? So that I'm just pushing it back, saying that there are people who are arguing that look, that may be one of the game-changing moments in the Gen AI world or in the AI world. But let's see how.
For technology, yes.
Yeah.
But the question that was asked is about the irregular, asymmetrical,
Yeah.
the fault lines, where how the humans evolved from the fault lines.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
that is a completely different level of evolution.
Okay.
I was just going to add actually what I think the interesting question within that question is something that I've been thinking about, which is, can ChatGPT think like a human, right?
Yeah.
Firstly, there's a question of, can it think? And that's a separate question, but can it think like a human? And I mean, I'm publishing a short piece on this in the next week or so. You'll find it on my blog, but really I think what it comes down to, the crux of it is, right, what is it about human thinking that's so different from how ChatGPT thinks? Because yeah, they make mistakes, they hallucinate, that's a technical term that they use for it, right? But would you call hallucination a form of creativity, right? That's an open question which everyone philosophically people are thinking about. And really the question, I mean, the fundamental what it comes down to, does it intend to do that, right? And intention is very important, right? Because if you say, you know, AIs create music, right? There are apps like Suno and things like that that are creating music, professional level musician, like what musicians would. But is it just a random manipulation of data, pattern recognition to generate something that sounds like music, or is it intending to create music that is tugging at the heartstrings in the way that a professional musician does, right? Those are the more fundamental, and then I get into things like intuition, instinct, none of which, you know, a model has. So when it makes a mistake, I think it's very different from how a human makes mistakes, and as Sudarshan was saying, learning from that mistake and so on.
Yeah, two quick things. One is human beings also hallucinate, no? Right? I'm sure all of us in this room would have hallucinated when we were kids, when we were giving answers to our parents. No, oh no, I did that, I did this, right? White lying or something like that.
Exaggeration, right?
Right? And also there are the other point was meaning I think this human being question and all, even though I think it's an interesting question to ask, but there is a group that thinks that look, this is just next word prediction. There is nothing more than this, right? Next token prediction, even if you were to go even to the next lower level. So what is so big deal about it?
My response to that quickly is that maybe now with
So given that he's recording it,
now with large language models, you might say yes, it is next token prediction, but you're all seeing that there are now, it's multimodal systems, right? It's actually
Soras and all that.
Yeah, when it becomes about audio and video and text, I that is not next token prediction. That is actually having
Fair
a
enough.
model of the world,
Fair enough.
which I think is closer to how humans experience and think about the world. So
Fair enough.
I'm quite optimistic about the next generation of AI.
Yeah.
I would want to
Yeah,
answer
sure.
one of the question which Amlan was saying.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Please contradict or ask yourself also questions.
Yeah, so hallucination is definitely good. That's the feature of generative AI, and we want models to hallucinate, right? That's how it will get more creative and go closer to the question that was asked. But what level of hallucination should it? You know, that is the primary factor that we have to use it, like, 0.2% hallucination, 0.3%. That is what the understanding that we should have when we are developing, especially for our use case. Like, how far my use case can hallucinate.
Yeah, next question is again towards copyright.
Before actually, I just want to end on a lighter note. In Oxford textbook of psychiatry, it says that all of us are normally abnormal. So only when you're abnormally abnormal, we get into trouble.
Yeah.
So hallucination to a certain level is fine, but if AI starts hallucinating to a great level, then we don't know how to handle it actually.
I don't know whether we should be normal to understand that or abnormal to understand that. Okay, let's move on. This is on the copyright issue question that before. Probably this is targeted to Bharti. So if I'm a customer of Infosys and I want specific feature of your RAI, how can you ensure that my data will not be used for other features? I'm concerned that if the same LLM is used, it might train itself with my data and potentially use it for other customers' features.
This is one of the prominent question that our clients also ask, right? That I don't want to use a foundation model because my data is going outside. So the solution to it is that, okay, this is, you have your infra within your network, and then we will give you a custom based model that we have developed, mostly based on the open source model. So you deploy your model within your environment using your own infra, and then your data is not going out of your enterprise. So that's the solution that we have. We are also working on the small language model to see that, you know, if some of the things can be done using the small language model, which will help them on compute cost as well.
Great. So this one is Professor Sudarshan. In SDG, all the discussion that you said, first we were discussing about digital financial inclusion. Now we are discussing about digital financial inclusion using AI. But what about AI inclusion or AI literacy itself as part of SDG? How important is AI inclusion in the context of India, where digital literacy is low, and what component we should focus on to promote AI literacy in India?
It's a very good question, because the UN is also extremely interested in making AI available. So the digital divide is actually one of the main, what I would say, thrusts of UN's Sustainable Development Goals as well. Because I think 16th or 17th, you will see that technology, inclusion, and empowerment, and equitability, many of these things in terms of education, and it's very much part of the UN's mandate. And especially now, AI, they have been pushing for this AI inclusion in several of the reports. You can see there are like several reports by the UN agencies on AI inclusion. And especially in third world countries or global south, this is a major push for UN. So in terms of education inclusion, in terms of almost all across the board, they are pushing for it. And digital divide and AI divide, especially, they don't want to do the same mistakes that they did during the digital divide era. So now they want to really keep a pace of what is happening. So in that sense, UN has been at the forefront in many ways, especially in the poorer countries, to include AI as part of the mandate. So it's a very good question, actually.
Okay. So next is probably to all three of you. This is slightly at a power and the power that AI compute is consuming, all that. So lots of resources for hardware and maintenance of systems are required for running these models. Considering people don't have enough water, we need huge amount of manufacturing for silicon components and all of this to be made. Shouldn't environmental responsibility also follow this RAI? We're talking a lot of RAI, but where is the discussion about, I don't know, environment problems? So one of for at least for your knowledge, one of the things that we decided to do as part of the summer school when we were planning is small thing, but we said that we'll not give pens, scribbling pads, no so to say first day kit. We were even considering whether we should do a physical certificate or a digital certificate when the summer school ends. There's nothing. They just come, they just go. There's no trees cut, nothing like that. So yeah, what's the discussion around this topic within the Gen AI business?
Yes, it's an important topic, right? Because while we are giving so much of emphasis and importance for AI, Gen AI, that, you know, what good are we doing for the environment? And the answer to it lies in how much less energy, how much less compute can we consume while we are developing or deploying, training or deploying our models. So the lower the compute power, like if we are able to run our AI use case on a laptop, like, you know, from the GPU, can we move it to CPU? So if we can move to the CPU, then we have answered this question, right? That we have reduced a lot of compute. So we are working very closely with NVIDIA, HPE, AMD, Intel, like, you know, as a launch partner. It's also to do the test validation of the newer, like newer CPUs, the Intel Gaudi, these hardwares that they are developing. We are doing the testing. We are running our models, the use cases on these infra, and giving them our feedback, like what is the performance. And there is a huge focus on this factor also, because to scale something at enterprise level, this plays a very key role. We can't tell that I have a code assistant use case and now all of you invest on GPUs and then you will have a code assistant. If we if we say so, then it will not run. I have to make it work at the edge. Like I have to make it work. My code assistant should be working on a computer. It will consume less energy. There will be less cost, and that is how we are going to scale and increase the revenue, and also help the environment and energy consumption.
Okay.
So I think definitely there is this question is at the forefront, and definitely multiple people are thinking about this whole sustainability with respect to the AI models, and especially with LLMs. My earlier work is basically deploying AI for sustainability, and specifically I have looked into the problems of consumption of large units like data centers, and how we can deploy more renewable energy using the optimized kind of decision making for data centers, so that instead of using the coal based or the traditional power for running the data centers, can we use more of the renewable energy at appropriate times. And there is a lot of interesting work to look at how we can align the workloads of Gen AI or the AI models with respect to basically availability of the renewable energy resources, especially let's say wind and solar, now hydrogen fuel cell, and all of other options which are being looked at. So there is a lot of AI in that as well. So it's not only like we can look at AI which is kind of impacting energy, but for solving energy problem there are a lot of interesting AI problems which are already there, and I have worked on some of those, and many people are actually investing in that. Also, I think there is a lot of interest in looking at all spectrum of models because of that, right? I think many of you would have looked at this 1-bit transformers which can run on CPUs. So there is research which is going on in that direction. There is research going on in the small language models which or the orchestration of models. So eventually you need not use the large language models for all sorts of tasks, but can you have the orchestration and the hierarchy of models where you are able to execute right level of task at right size of models, and to be able to do that in an automated manner, right? So I think definitely we should not think of sustainability of Gen AI models as again afterthought, but it should be at the kind of front and center as we are developing and deploying these AI solutions. But we need to look at it from different angles, how we can address the sustainability problem using the technology, how can we increase efficiency of the existing models, and how can we come up with completely new paradigms like the 1-bit transformers, right? Where we can not necessarily need GPUs for running these models.
So great. So I think this question is directly to Tanuja for you, because I think this has come probably out of your slides. Can you explain the concepts of pirate, back transaction defense, and fine-tuning defense in layman's term?
So I will start with the back translation defense, right? So many a times, especially for jailbreak kind of scenarios, the jailbreak is basically trying to kind of nudge the LLMs to let's say create harmful content without that being get noticed, right, as part of any of the filters. So that's what jailbreaks are trying to do. So imagine that the jailbreak is successful, and the model is able to kind of split the content, or able to kind of give the output which is now completely includes the content which is, it could be harm or sexually explicit content or whatever. The back translation defense would try to infer the prompt from this being an output, and the model is now being trained to kind of guess what would be the prompt if this is the output which is given. And if you are able to get the prompt the prompt is then now kind of sent through the let's say same sort of filters, right? Content moderation filter. So many a times while jailbreak is not able to kind of get filtered as part of content moderation because it's gone through nudges and the different types of questions, the output now when kind of used to infer the prompt, it would give you a quite explicit content, and you would be able to moderate that content quite effectively. So there is a very interesting paper which is part of the reference that I had put in as well, where how the back translation is kind of used for the mechanism to kind of address jailbreaks. Pirate is primarily open source Python based library which is looking into some of the different aspects of identifying the risks, right? So here again the different specific data sets are being used for modeling the AI model, which would be able to identify specific tasks of specific categories of the risks, and you can extend on top of that as well because this is kind of a open source model, so you can train it further, you can expand it to further kind of classifications of the risks, and you can expand it for multiple languages and other things as well. Fine tuning for the security aspects, right? So especially this is where let's say what is observed is lot of times, especially with the code generation kind of models, the models would generate the code, but alongside that it would have the code lines which might have the malware included in that, let's say, or it would have a couple of code lines which would include data being used to, let's say, external parties. So basically fine tuning all these kind of code generation or specific aspects with security practices being deployed on the curated data, and using that data for the fine tuning is able to identify or control this malware generation or other types of kind of side effect issues which are coming as part of the code generation. So that is the kind of fine tuning approach which can be used.
Very nice. So this is again probably to Bharti and Thanuja. This is one of the favorite questions, and the next one is the most upvoted questions. I'll keep it for everybody for that one, I guess. So this question reads as: Gen AI can be a really good tool. We were actually talking about this in the launch. A really good tool for software developers to enhance their productivity. But companies often ask their developers not to use these tools in order to avoid leaking company code to their models, third-party Gen AI tool providers, etc. Is there a way to overcome this challenge so that the Gen AI can be adopted as much larger scale in software companies?
Yes, definitely. I think it follows the same answer what I was telling earlier. The AI should be at the edge. So when it's at the edge, for example, those who are concerned about leaking their code, so they will not be concerned if you are able to have your code assistant on a client given laptop, or on a laptop which is like client authenticated. Like you have a VPN, you connect to VPN, and only then you will have a code assistant which is trained based on client code. So they will not have concerns at that stage because the data is not getting leaked. So when we have AI at the edge, or when we have the code assistant deployed in an infrastructure which is specific to client, they will not have these concerns. So there are two things that that is very important. One is client having their own infra to deploy the model, and second is we should go with as small as a model so that they are not spending too much on the compute.
So I'll just add a couple of points to what Bharti already said, right? So one thing is there are, I think, right now several reasons why companies are still kind of not sure of how to use or what are the best practices of using these, let's say, co-pilots or AI assistants as part of the code, right? So for example, if certain company has very specific code practices, and if these code practices are not being followed when you are using LLMs, which are generic LLMs, that is one of the concerns which is there, right? But especially is in if you are going back to what Bharti said, if you are deploying these AI co-pilots or AI assistants in specific infrastructures where it kind of guarantees not to utilize the data which is being generated as part of your code into training of these models, these are safe models to kind of use for your companies. Many companies are also thinking about fine-tuning these existing code models to include their best practices or their kind of repositories, right? I think that would be great, because that would have the flavor and understanding of that particular company's existing best practices included. And where we are seeing a lot of interesting use or advantage of using these kind of models is a lot of times there are a lot of migration kind of tasks, right? As in typically, especially in large companies, there would be new security packages deployment, a lot of, let's say, migrations from one programming language to other programming language, kind of migrations for infrastructure. So typically all these kind of bulk migration kind of code workloads, those are very effectively can be handled using these AI models and with just the manual oversight. So there are, I think, multiple use cases in programming as well where AI models can be very effective.
Sure. Continuing with you only, question about, this is the most sort of say upvoted question in that sense, which is what are the, Arun earlier said about, look, I think if you talk about skills, have the fundamentals, all that, but what does it take to get a sort of say work for an industry R&D sort of say sector? What skills are students today they should be looking at picking so that they can have a career in an R&D industry in India?
So I think definitely there is no replacement for understanding of basics and fundamentals. I think that's the most important skill that I would consider, because new technologies would come. The existing AI models would keep evolving. What you have learned today would not be applicable another 3 years down the line, right? But what I have seen, and recently someone was asking me this question as well, right? We are doing a lot of HCI studies, for example. Now we are talking about a lot of responsible AI practices. But all these new responsible AI practices, HCI studies that even we are discussing in the age of generative AI, are based on the same principles that we were applying for, let's say, ICTD technologies few years back. So I think having your fundamentals strong, having the interdisciplinary understanding, as I said earlier as well, right? And having an open mind to learn, and basically kind of go ahead with a very open perspective is what is required right now to be successful in any research. Kind of be curious, ask questions, don't comply to the existing practices and norms, ask a lot of questions.
I think they have
that's what
asked
we
enough
need to do.
questions today. Yeah, so go on. Bharti, do you have anything to add, Bharti? Otherwise, I'll move on. Next couple of questions is to Amlan. So
Yes, that don't look out specifically saying that, I want to get into an R&D role, right? Any role in AI, Gen AI, RAI gives that opportunity for research, and it is up to you that, once you get into your role, could be consulting or development or even a red teaming for that matter. But you get into research, nobody is stopping you from doing a research, and we need lot of knowledge, we need lot of speakers in this field, right? Because every day the use cases or the conversations that come from client is a surprise, and I don't have a solution the moment they ask me that I want to have, and we want them to challenge like that, because then we will decode, we will do for it, and then we will take that knowledge to the next client. So there is ample amount of opportunity for research, and it is up to individual that how quickly you can be doing the research, and then how much you can be up to date, because the knowledge and the speed at which it is going is like tremendous, right? So it's you have a huge thing to catch up, which cannot be done in a day or a two. So it's a continuous learning, and as long as you are doing it, then you are on top of it.
okay, good. Let's last 6-7 minutes. We should Amlan, probably we can even do it like a rapid fire round. So why do we need global AI framework?
3 reasons. One, to ensure that AI benefits all of humanity. global north, global south, east or west. Two, to ensure that there is no, you use the word concentration, there's no concentration of resources in either one region, one company, one set of stakeholders. And three, to ensure that it actually is being able to meet overall kind of global social cultural values
Very nice.
representing.
I think you mentioned this earlier, but can you throw some insights on why it is so? Regulation is generally slow catching up. What are the reasons for it?
Couple of reasons. One is that technology generally dual use. You can use AI for good or for bad, in a way that you can use a knife, right, to cut a cake or to murder someone. So it's very hard to regulate the bad without trying to compromise the good, right? So it's always a challenge for a regulator to say, this is the type of regulation where we know we are going to ensure all of the downsides are addressed without compromising the upside. So it's a little bit of a wait and watch. Two, I think, is it requires domain expertise, which obviously within the government, within policymakers, we don't really have.
So should we regulate these companies? Should the government policy govern emissions? We talked about just now power. It is taking all that. Should these companies be regulated?
100% yes.
Companies to be regulated, okay. Where is India in the AI regulations timeline right now?
Slow, and I think most of what I've heard is that we need to wait and watch for the next 6 months before we make our first move. Okay. What that first move, I think, will be a combination of, I said earlier, some self-regulation, some co-regulation, and minimal strict regulation.
Sure. So now, so I'll give all four of you last final thoughts.
Yeah, and so we need to look at holistically. As we have spoken, right, in length. That is not from the technical perspective. Look at process perspective. Look at legal perspective, and look at the governance perspective. That while an AI Act has come, how are we going to ensure without actually hindering the innovation in AI? Like, how are we going to ensure the AI development? Let's because we are AI minds, and we will definitely add value in that area. And then before India, Amlan is saying that India is slow, so that is definitely one of the area. It is our responsibility, right, to give that information, to be part of it, and then provide our insights, like how EU Act came, or how US and Singapore are coming with their own acts. India is such a diversified country. It needs a lot more regulations, probably. It cannot be, we cannot just copy paste UI Act or a US regulation. So it needs lot more diversification, being what we are. So our contributions there also matters most in terms of research or participating in those meetings. So holistically, we should be working in all these areas.
Great.
So think of AI as a tool and not the kind of everything, right? So today I see that, especially for the students, I don't know how much it's true for many of you sitting here, but people want to learn AI at the expense of everything else, right? As in not studying the fundamentals. And I think that's going to bite us. So think of AI as one other tool. And especially if you are working on the use of AI in your applications, think about it from the problem first perspective. So what is the real problem? What is the real intervention which is required? Is your technology, is the simple ML model required? Is the Gen AI model required? If you are going to deploy Gen AI model, what's the outcome? And is that outcome really solving the first problem where you started with, right? I think we need to really think holistically. Otherwise, right now I'm just thinking and looking at it, we are using AI as a hammer. We are going with the hammer to kind of, use it wherever possible. And I think that's not going to be sustainable. So that's one thing I really would like all of you to kind of think about. Think about the AI deployment holistically, and we have been talking about this whole responsible AI aspect from the user perspective, from the policymaker perspective, from the developer perspective, and have your voice. Because you are the ones who are going to develop systems, you are the ones who are going to use most of the AI systems in coming time as well. So have your perspective, participate in the whole conversation that is happening or continue to happen more on the AI regulations, AI policy, AI deployments, and your voice is going to be extremely important. So that's primarily I would say.
So I'm excited about AI for change in terms of how it can transform governance, education, environment. So it can be a really give us data at unforeseen levels hitherto. So in that sense, we will, if you use it properly, and be able to address many of these issues. So in that sense, now it is used as a cannon to get rid of the cockroaches in the house. So I think we have to be more tempered in our approach. Should have temperance in terms of understanding and how to use the AI. So it is definitely a transformative tool. So in that sense, there is no doubt about it. So, but it is not, as Tanuja rightly pointed out, solution for everything, all for all. It is not everything for everybody. So in that sense, we need to have prudence, which is one very, very old ethical concept called prudence, used by both Aristotle as well as Thiruvalluvar. So in that sense, we need to be prudent about how we use AI to ensure that we become a more sustainable society. Thank you.
I would just say it would be excellent to have, I think as Tanuja was saying, all of you represented in the policy debate on AI regulation for India, right? At the global forums, right, there are all of these different stakeholders. There are technical experts, there's academia, civil society, government officials. But in some forums, global forums, there is actually a representation for youth, right? And I think that's what you all represent, the youth. What do you want the policy landscape to look like 10 years from now, 5 years from now? So I think in the Indian policy debate, we need to have more of that. So I would just say maybe even for you, PK, how maybe we can think about how maybe a quick survey or some way, qualitative, quantitative metric by which we can take this to the government, right? And say, this is what the researchers of tomorrow want when it comes to AI policy, responsible AI, right? And they really want to listen to you. It's just that we don't have, I mean, the summer school is such an excellent forum where I really wanted to come and participate, because you don't have, 60 plus people, sharp minds thinking about these issues in one room. So how can we get your voice directly to the people who are making these decisions?
I hope all of you heard that. He said sharp minds. Okay. So Tanuja, I think some people don't want to go away without getting answers to some questions. So let's do a couple of them. Tanuja, this is for you. You mentioned how AI is helping in the education sector, agri sector, etc. But most of the rural area people are yet to get handy with smartphones, though it is available in their native languages. So don't you think this will increase more gap between the tech people and the rural people, leading to more gap rather than bridging it? I think this question we have talked about before, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so primarily I think the way, at least in my lab, we are looking at it, start with the bottom of the pyramid, right? If you are able to solve the problem, so that's one of the reasons when I'm currently working in the education sector, we are working with the government school teachers and not the highly resourced school teachers. If we can solve the problems for the government school teachers, it would be directly applicable for other schools as well. And which means that we need to deal with all the infrastructure challenges, including they not having the computer systems or high-end resources available to them, not having AV classrooms and everything, right? So if we can solve that problem, then definitely it would be applicable to rest of the world. So we being in India, having access to this community, it's definitely one of the things that we are starting with bottom of the pyramid and going across, and that's the approach.
So those are the last two questions, but thanks. It was fantastic to have this interactions. Thanks to all four of you.